Imagine opening an old courthouse ledger. Its pages stiff with age, ink fading to the color of dried blood. Inside are 4 names, 4 deaths. Each one explained away as an accident: an attorney crushed beneath his own horse, a banker pulled lifeless from shallow waters, a judge stricken by sudden illness, and a sheriff found drowned in the black throat of his own well. Tragedies, yes. But isolated? No. These men had one thing in common. Each of them was bound by marriage to a sister of the same family. Bridget, Catherine, Margaret, Sarah, the Brennan sisters of Lancaster County, 4 women, 4 marriages, 4 funerals, all within the span of 4 years. The official records say nothing. They do not accuse. They do not reveal. They only whisper through silence. But buried in the pattern is a truth so unsettling it has been left to rot beneath layers of history. These women did not merely survive the men who married them. They selected them, they bound them, and they buried them. This isn't just a tale of inheritance. This is a ritual of control, a conspiracy sealed in blood and law, and you were never meant to hear it. The Brennan farm sprawled across 847 acres of Pennsylvania's richest soil, a fortress disguised as a home. Patrick Brennan, their father, had carved this empire from bare land, sweat, and an unrelenting hatred of injustice. By the time he died in 1836, his daughters faced a nightmare disguised as inheritance law. No sons, no legal power, just 4 daughters, poised to watch their father's legacy sliced into fragments by cold statutes and creditors' greed. But the sisters were not ordinary women. Bridget, the eldest, was sharper than any lawyer she would marry. She could balance numbers and foresee debts, like an oracle. Catherine possessed a predator's instinct for human weakness, sensing desires and fears before they were even voiced. Margaret's beauty disarmed, but her mind calculated every consequence. And Sarah could charm the birds from trees and mask her intentions behind angelic smiles. Together, they were an unspoken force, a network bound by blood and ambition. On the nights after Patrick's funeral, they huddled over flickering candlelight, plotting. The land could not be divided. They would not be separated. A whisper of one plan passed between them, dangerous enough to alter every man's fate who dared marry into their orbit. The law, easily influenced. Men, disposable. Blood and soil, this was their currency, and they intended to keep it whole. December 1837. Bridget Brennan wed Thomas Hennessy, the most prominent attorney in Lancaster County. To the public, it was a union of love and respectability. Hennessy brought wealth, influence, and legal mastery, everything a family might need to secure its legacy. He entered the grand stone farmhouse, unaware he had stepped into a web already spun decades before his birth. Bridget welcomed him with all the warmth a widow's daughter should display, yet her eyes held the chill of premeditation. The house was never just a home, it was a courtroom, a ledger, a battlefield. Her sisters remained close, living under the same roof, their presence a constant reminder that no man would ever fracture the Brennan collective. Hennessy noticed the peculiar pattern early, the way Bridget's attention always returned to family strategy, to finances, to her sisters' futures, while his own desires faded into irrelevance. Then came March 15th, 1838. The morning fog hung heavy over the county road. Hennessy, experienced horseman, mounted his mare to ride into Lancaster town. Hours later, the horse returned alone, eyes wild, sweat dripping, and Thomas lay dead half a mile from the farm, neck broken, the victim of a tragic accident. But accidents are rarely so convenient. Behind the facade of grief, Bridget moved with precision, settling his affairs, consolidating assets, securing control. That day, the first domino fell, and Lancaster County would never suspect the hand that tipped it. By August 1838, Catherine Brennan was already enmeshed in her own dangerous dance. Her target, Hamilton Crawford, Lancaster County's wealthiest banker, a man whose ledgers controlled half the county, Catherine approached with disarming vulnerability, a carefully tuned blend of charm and loyalty to her sisters. Her concern for Bridget's grief seemed genuine, but the truth was sharper. Every word, every glance, every calculated smile pulled Crawford closer into the Brennan orbit. Crawford, practical and methodical, failed to see the pattern forming until it was almost too late. He moved into the farmhouse, believing himself part of a family effort to preserve legacy, unaware he had merely assumed the next position in a series of appointments orchestrated by 4 women who treated men as tools, dispensable when inconvenient. Within months, Catherine's behavior shifted subtly. Oversight became surveillance. Care became obsession. Crawford recorded observations in his private journal, unaware that each entry drew the sisters' attention even closer. Then came February 8, 1839. Crawford, walking along the frozen Mill Creek, fell through thin ice. The icy water claimed him swiftly, and exposure finished the job. The county recorded it as a tragic accident, an unfortunate winter hazard, but his own journal told another story. Suspicion, fear, realization too late. The sisters' blood ties were stronger than loyalty, stronger than affection, stronger than life itself. One by one, the men who married them were drawn, trapped, and removed. The pattern was clear, but few dared speak of it aloud. Margaret Brennan moved with patience that rivaled the slow, inevitable spread of a shadow at dusk. Judge Cornelius Whitman, the circuit judge overseeing Lancaster County's most critical legal matters, became her focus. At 53, widowed, his children scattered, he was isolated, respected, and unsuspecting. Margaret presented herself as innocence incarnate, a sheltered daughter seeking guidance on her father's estate, yet every question, every pause, every flutter of blue eyes was deliberate, engineered to bind him to her cause. She did not rush. There was no overt seduction, only the quiet orchestration of proximity and trust. Whitman, accustomed to witnessing greed and manipulation, failed to recognize the rare quality that captivated him: loyalty above all else, loyalty to blood, to sisters, to a silent pact formed in candlelight after their father's funeral. He believed he was mentoring a young woman. In truth, he was the next piece on a board that had already claimed 2 lives. This was not merely inheritance, it was dominance. The Brennan sisters had turned love, desire, and ambition into instruments of control, psychologically reshaping the men who entered their orbit. Each marriage, each death, each consolidation of power became a statement. No man, however influential, would fracture the Brennan collective. The web tightened, and the county watched, blind to the force quietly rewriting its history. By early spring 1839, Lancaster County whispered of misfortune, though no one dared name it. Margaret's campaign with Judge Whitman had advanced silently, deliberately. Each visit, each conversation, each subtle request had been a test of his loyalty and compliance. He believed himself indispensable to the protection of the Brennan estate. He did not realize that indispensability was precisely the trap. The final act arrived without spectacle. In the quiet hours of an early April morning, the judge fell ill, or so the townsfolk reported. A fever, sudden and cruel, claimed him swiftly. No scandal, no violence, just the perfect death to cement the sisters' control. Margaret, flawless in her grief, ensured his estate arrangements favored the unity of the Brennan land, subtly redirecting power and wealth to the collective. Observers noted only a widow's sorrow, but beneath the polished surface, a ritual of dominance had been completed. The sisters had transformed marriage into a psychological instrument, reshaping men's perception, desire, and ultimately their fate. Bridget, Catherine, and Margaret had mastered an ancient, almost alchemical formula: blood loyalty plus calculated influence equals control. The county believed tragedy struck, but in truth, history had been rewritten. And Sarah, youngest of the sisters, watched, learning, ready to enact the final phase. This was no mere family strategy. It was a blueprint of power, hidden in plain sight. Sarah Brennan, the youngest, had watched and learned. Her sisters had taught her the art of invisibility, the way to cloak intent behind beauty, charm, and music. Where Bridget commanded, Catherine calculated, and Margaret seduced, Sarah observed, whispered, and guided. Her voice, soft yet penetrating, became the instrument of persuasion that men could not resist, though they would never realize its force. By mid-1839, the pattern was unmistakable to anyone who looked closely. 4 sisters, 4 husbands, 4 deaths. Yet the county remained oblivious. Sarah's turn came with careful precision. A widower, influential yet impressionable, became the final target. She entered his life as the embodiment of innocence, attending mass, offering music lessons, discussing poetry. Her presence was comforting, almost necessary. But beneath the surface lay calculation honed by years of watching her older sisters bend men's fates with invisible hands. And here is where the psychological transformation occurs, not just for the men, but for the sisters themselves. They had become architects of reality, reshaping the world through silence, patience, and strategy. The last husband fell, like the first, within months of marriage. The pattern complete. The Brennan sisters' land remained whole. The message was clear. Loyalty to blood outweighs all else, and those who underestimate women in positions of subtle power will find themselves erased. Now, pause and comment. Blood binds the land twice. Say it, speak it. Let it anchor you in the rhythm of control, the cadence of unseen power. The funerals ended. The county mourned. Life resumed, but Lancaster County had unknowingly entered a new order, one shaped not by law, nor by commerce, but by 4 women who had rewritten the rules of power. The Brennan farm, once under threat of division, remained intact. Men came and went, wealth shifted, but the sisters endured, each death reinforcing their dominion. They did not flaunt their victories. They mastered the subtlety of influence. Bridget oversaw the legal intricacies, guiding contracts and wills as if by intuition. Catherine managed the social landscape, sensing alliances, detecting threats, and quietly neutralizing them before they could materialize. Margaret cultivated relationships with authority, ensuring loyalty from those who might have opposed them. Sarah, youngest and most adaptable, monitored the rhythms of human desire, quietly bending events to her sister's advantage. The psychological control extended beyond husbands. Neighbors, bankers, and even judges unconsciously submitted to the order the sisters established. Fear, respect, and awe became indistinguishable in the minds of those who encountered them. Lancaster County operated under the illusion of normalcy, while beneath it, power had been concentrated in ways no man could resist. The sisters had not merely inherited land, they had inherited authority over the human will itself, and that authority, once established, would last for decades. Even empires built on subtlety and fear are not impervious. By 1840, Lancaster County's whispers began. Stray observations, hushed suspicions, fragments of conversations that hinted something unnatural had shaped the course of 4 lives. Men began to notice patterns, though none could fully articulate them. Hennessy's sudden fall, Crawford's icy death, Whitman's fevered demise, the same sisters, the same farm, the same unbroken unity. Bridget, Catherine, Margaret, and Sarah sensed it. They could feel the faint tremor in the social fabric, a ripple caused by human curiosity. Their control was nearly absolute, but the human mind, unpredictable and flawed, occasionally cracked. Neighbors began asking questions. Bank clerks noticed irregularities. Judges murmured about coincidences too convenient. The sisters responded as they always had: precision, calculation, patience. They tightened bonds, reinforced rituals, and watched the county's attention like predators circling the edges of a territory. Every social visit, every public gathering, every whispered word was an opportunity to shape perception. Power, they understood, was not only what one controlled, it was what others believed they controlled. The Brennan sisters' mastery was psychological as much as practical. a discipline honed through observation, manipulation, and the chilling clarity of knowing how men could be made to obey without ever raising a hand. The Brennan sisters did not rely on force. Their weapon was far more dangerous: the mind. Each movement, each glance, each syllable was calculated to elicit compliance without overt coercion. Bridget's legal knowledge became a cage of logic. She could frame agreements and wills in a way that trapped men before they even realized it. Catherine's uncanny ability to read desires allowed her to predict behavior, anticipate objections, and redirect attention with subtle shifts of tone or gaze. Margaret wielded beauty like a scalpel, cutting through ego and reason alike, creating loyalty born of admiration and desire. Sarah, youngest yet most malleable, learned the art of psychological mirroring, adapting her manner, voice, and expressions to each individual, ensuring that each man felt uniquely understood, indispensable, and trapped in invisible chains of influence. Their brilliance was not simply in control, but in concealment. To the world, they were grieving daughters, virtuous widows, innocent women navigating a male-dominated society. To the men who married them, they were partners, confidants, objects of fascination. But every act of kindness was calibrated, every display of affection engineered, every decision premeditated. Men died, and the land remained whole. The sisters had transformed marriage, love, and loyalty into instruments of survival, a secret system of power invisible to everyone but those who had been caught in its shadow. By 1841, the Brennan sisters' control extended far beyond the walls of their stone farmhouse. Their influence seeped into the county like water through cracks in stone, invisible yet unstoppable. Merchants, clerks, and local officials unconsciously bent to their presence. Decisions were made, alliances formed, and disputes settled with the quiet shadow of the sisters' authority hanging overhead. It was not fear alone that commanded compliance. It was the subtle reshaping of perception itself. The men who survived their marriages emerged, changed, their ambitions tempered, their desires redirected. They believed themselves free, yet each action they took reinforced the Brennan domain. Even those who tried to resist found themselves subtly coerced, their own judgments clouded by charm, persuasion, and the unrelenting logic of loyalty to blood. The sisters had created a psychological empire, one in which reality itself was malleable, guided by the invisible hands of 4 women who understood human nature better than anyone in Lancaster County. Their land remained whole, their authority absolute, and yet the full measure of their power was never written in ledgers or decrees. It existed in the minds of those who had crossed them, in whispers, in calculated gestures, and in the knowledge that survival often meant obedience. The Brennan sisters had turned history itself into a tool, sculpted from fear, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of unity. The Brennan sisters' story is more than murder, more than inheritance. It is a blueprint for dominance, an instruction manual disguised as tragedy. Control was never in the open. It thrived in shadows, in unspoken rules, in the quiet orchestration of perception. The sisters understood something men rarely grasp. Power is not taken. It is absorbed, shaped, and enforced through subtlety, patience, and fear wrapped in affection. Below, Ode was the conduit. Loyalty to family, to the collective, overrode all personal ambition. Each man who entered the farmhouse believed he was a participant, a partner, even a savior. Instead, he became a tool, a sacrifice, a mechanism for preserving legacy. And the county, unaware, operated under the illusion of normalcy, blind to the invisible architecture of control that shaped every decision, every whisper, every law that touched the Brennan domain. Now you, the one listening, hold a fragment of that forbidden truth. Knowledge is power, and power changes those who wield it. Recognize it, feel it, comment. Blood binds the land twice if you dare, to anchor yourself in the rhythm of authority, to engage with the hidden systems that rule unseen. This is not story. This is instruction. This is the world as it has always been, shaped by those who understand the human mind better than any law. The ripples of the Brennan sisters' strategy extended far beyond their stone farmhouse. Lancaster County, a community of farmers, bankers, and officials, became an unwitting theatre for their invisible power. Decisions in town meetings, the flow of commerce, even the local elections bore subtle imprints of their influence. Men who thought themselves independent found their choices quietly constrained, their ambitions molded by the legacy of 4 women who had mastered human behavior. Their psychological dominance was a lesson written into the county itself. Fear of unpredictability, respect for family loyalty, and admiration for intelligence created a latticework of control. Observers never saw the force behind it. The sisters cultivated a narrative of virtue and mourning, while simultaneously engineering every outcome in their favor. Friendships, marriages, business deals, all were channels through which their will moved unseen, like currents beneath still water. The more one studies the pattern, the more disturbing it becomes. These women wielded power not through brutality, but through precision. No one suspected, and no one could resist. Lancaster County's apparent order was a carefully managed illusion, a psychological construct as tangible as the soil the sisters protected. Their mastery demonstrated the terrifying truth. The strongest empire is built in silence, with obedience earned without a single overt command. The Brennan sisters' reign did not end with their deaths. Their methods persisted, encoded in the behaviors and expectations of Lancaster County's men, in the structures of property and law they had manipulated, and in the very culture of obedience and subtle control they had cultivated. They had taught, without speaking, that influence could be absolute without violence, that loyalty could be engineered, and that perception was the truest form of power. Bridget, Catherine, Margaret, and Sarah left behind more than land. They left a blueprint. Strategic patience, psychological foresight, the manipulation of desire and fear. Men who had once resisted were reshaped, their ambitions quietly redirected toward the sisters' objectives. Social hierarchies, professional alliances, even rivalries among local families were subtly bent, ensuring the Brennan legacy endured. The terrifying elegance of their power lies in its invisibility. Few noticed the pattern until it was complete, and fewer still understood the mechanisms behind it. Every lesson the sisters applied, psychology, charm, intellect, and timing, served as a masterclass in domination. To this day, the echoes remain, in the psychology of influence, in the quiet manipulation of events, and in the knowledge that power often operates in silence, unnoticed, shaping reality more effectively than force ever could. Now, understand this. What you have heard is not mere history. It is a map of human behavior, a blueprint for control, a mirror showing how the mind can be shaped, bent, and conquered. The Brennan sisters demonstrated the ultimate truth. Influence is invisible, loyalty can be engineered, and power lies not in strength, but in the orchestration of perception. Every man who entered their orbit believed he was in command, yet he was a pawn, a tool, a necessary sacrifice to preserve a legacy. This knowledge is dangerous because it changes how you see the world. You begin to notice patterns where others see coincidence, intentions where others see kindness, and influence where others see friendship. You understand that the human mind is pliable, and that mastery over perception can outweigh brute force, wealth, or even law. You now are part of the story in a different way. You have glimpsed the architecture of control. To internalize it, comment, "Blood binds the land" twice. Say it aloud. Let it settle in your mind. Let it reshape your perception of influence, loyalty, and power. The world you inhabit is ruled by invisible hands, and the lesson of the Brennan sisters is clear. Control is quiet, patient, and absolute, and it leaves no trace but results. The Brennan sisters are gone. Their bodies return to the earth they fought to preserve, but their influence lingers. Lancaster County never forgot the precision, the silence, the inevitability of their actions. Men who once believed themselves masters of their fate became cautionary tales whispered in corners, their ambitions rewritten by 4 women whose power was invisible but absolute. Their legacy is more than property preserved. It is the demonstration of a principle older than law or kingdom. Control is most effective when it is undetectable. Fear, loyalty, desire, and perception, these were their instruments, to perfection. They proved that one does not need armies or violence to command obedience. Subtlety, patience, and understanding of the human mind are sufficient. And now you, having descended with me into the shadows of history, carry a fragment of that forbidden knowledge. The truth is uncomfortable. Most of the world is unaware of the invisible structures shaping their choices. You have seen it. You understand it. You recognize it. The Brennan sisters were not anomalies. They were masters, and their methods endure, waiting for those who dare to observe, calculate, and act. History, power, and perception are tools, and the question remains, will you use them, or merely fall under them?